to go ahead when I think the majority of Irish people believe it would be an insult to the victims of Israel's crimes for us to be playing a football game against them and treating them as a normal state when they've shown them to be a state themselves to be a state that for whom there are no rules, there are no red lines, there's no crimes that regime won't commit. So we will be protesting loudly about the double standards of the government on this.
Will fans be complicit? You take the question.
I'll just finish and then you can get in the questions, Senan. Second issue I want to raise, I've raised it repeatedly over a number of years, but I've been raising it very loudly over the last few months, and it's something that came up significantly on the doors while we were canvassing, is the issue of social housing income thresholds for eligibility for social housing. There is nothing more infuriating for people to be on a housing list for 10 or 15 years and then get thrown off that list, sometimes when they're actually in homeless accommodation, because their income goes over an income threshold limit which is very low and has not been adjusted upwards since 2003. So it's a way of the government doing a stealth cut on the numbers of people that are on the waiting lists for housing, but leaving those people with no options whatsoever. Because most people, in fact nearly everybody who goes over the social housing income thresholds, does not have an income that's sufficient to get cost rental. Because the cost rental affordability criteria rule them out because their income is too low. And the government have refused to raise those thresholds, and they've been talking about raising them, but actually have done nothing about it. So there's it really infuriates huge numbers of ordinary people who are working hard but are completely priced out of the housing market, for whom even cost rental is not an option because their income is so low, but they are deemed ineligible for social housing because they go over an income threshold. Sometimes because they are getting one parent's the working family payment. Incredibly, right? So that their income is so low, they have to get an income supplement from the state, but that takes them over a limit where they are eligible for social housing. So we are going to be campaigning very hard, starting today, to push the government to raise the social housing income thresholds and to end this situation where they are culling the social housing lists.
So I just want to comment. Obviously, the death of Eve Sakila last week prompted a huge reaction, a huge protest, and I'm very glad that happened and that there has been a Black Coalition Ireland established. It was something that was missing when, for example, George and Kencho was killed. But I also want to mention, in my own constituency again, a horrific and brutal killing of Alex Coughlin, a young man who was out walking, who was attacked by apparently two people and brutally assaulted, and that assault was filmed for social media. It's had a huge impact in our community, and I just want to send my solidarity, my best wishes to his family, to his relatives, to his friends who are trying to come to terms with this. I think it brings up a number of issues. I think it brings up the way social media has dehumanised people. I think it brings up the level of violence that it has normalised among particularly young men and boys, through the manosphere and so on. Obviously the investigation has to take place, but immediately those are the things, when you see that somebody could actually film something like that and put it on social media, just speaks volumes to the impact that social media is having on some people. And a gathering took place on Sunday. I understand the family didn't actually want anything, so that is why I didn't go, and other TDs, I understand, didn't go for that reason. I just see it was commented upon. But I think the key thing is that the community is reeling from this, and I hope that these perpetrators are swiftly brought to justice and that we have a discussion in society about the horrors of social media. And secondly, I just want to comment on the Occupied Territories Bill. We hear that there is going to be a watered down Occupied Territories Bill which will only cater for goods and not services, which has been a huge demand of, the whole of society, and also will only cover part of the occupied territories, the Palestinian part, not the so-called Israeli part. So I think that's extremely worrying. I think it's a complete breach of faith with the electorate, what Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil promised. And it comes in the week when we saw the brutal treatment of Flotilla activists. What other country will get away with torturing our citizens and then, being welcomed in with a football match? I think the protest that's due to take place by the IPSC, I think this issue of the Ireland-Israel game is going to really become massive in the summer, after the summer in particular, and it stopped the games, plural, because there shouldn't be any dealings with the Israeli team, which is steeped in apartheid, steeped in destroying Palestinian sporting facilities, and steeped in the IDF. And I think we need loads of local campaigns around that to put the pressure on to stop the game, and if it isn't stopped, to gather to make sure it is stopped that day. So I think that's going to be key. And lastly, the assessment of needs as well. I believe the government is bringing something to Cabinet today that might try to take away the rights of parents that the assessment of needs gives. It's the one thing that gives people rights to education, rights to services. The government is determined to get rid of it, nothing to do with the waiting lists, and they'll have a big campaign on their hands if they do that.
Just on the Ireland-Israel game, the FAI have said it's going ahead. I'm pretty sure tickets are for sale, so it is likely to go ahead. Would you call on Irish football fans to boycott it instead, like with an empty stadium, send out a message?
Well, my preference would be that we stop physically the game from happening. So, we would call for example, airport workers, hotel workers, to take even strike action, like happened with the Dun strike against apartheid. But if it does get to that, they do get into the country. And by the way, they're talking about reserving 3,000 seats for these fans who run amok in other places. It's unbelievable when Palestinian kids weren't allowed in to play Gaelic sports. But that on the day itself, I think that we should surround the Aviva Stadium and stop this match from happening.
Any fans who attend, will they be colluding with the genocide and war crimes in Gaza?
I think very few fans will attend, to be frank.
Those
I don't think.
Are they colluding with the Israeli?
Urge them not to. We'd urge them not to.
But ladies and gentlemen, you've suggested that the Israeli team is steeped in apartheid and steeped in the IDF. Therefore, anybody who attends the match is colluding, correct?
We're putting this on the government and the FAI, not on fans or anybody else. So just to make that clear, the allowance of this game to go ahead is down to the government. They can decide, for example, to issue travel bans on Israeli people. There's all sorts of things that they can do. Bertie Ahern, who's, come out with the racist comments, even banned Yugoslav fans getting visas. So they can do it. It was done in the 70s and 80s around apartheid.
Well, can I just ask you about the point you were making earlier about Sinn Féin? Is Sinn Féin getting a bit of a pass from you guys? Because I feel like if, or indeed when, Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael adopted similar positions on reproductive rights, migration, animal welfare, I feel like you would never entertain supporting those parties in government. So why are Sinn Féin getting special treatment when they don't seem to be all that left-wing in some of their recent policies?
I mean, every time that Sinn Féin betray the left aspirations of many of their voters, we call them out. Ruth called out, for example, there was a leaflet distributed in Dublin Central with the headline Sinn Féin manage migration. Sinn Féin will manage migration, which Ruth explicitly went into, laid out, etc. We criticised them definitively for their vote against the bill, the Social Democrats' bill to expand abortion rights. To be clear, by the way, because I heard one of the rationale put forward for that was that, they could only do what their AGM or their Ardesh had agreed to, but literally in the last all term they voted for our bill, which went further than that, so that didn't make any sense. So we continue to call out Sinn Féin for what we consider to be wrong policies, But I do think make a distinction between Sinn Féin and Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. The crucial distinction is their voters. Like, the voters of Sinn Féin are voting for Sinn Féin because they want a radical change in this country. They want a break from over 100-year rule of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and they look to Sinn Féin, for example, what Sinn Féin has said on the cost of living, on the housing crisis, in opposition to the establishment in many ways, and therefore we think there are many good people who vote for Sinn Féin, many good people who are members of or supporters of Sinn Féin, and so we appeal to those people to draw the lessons of these by-elections, that this strategy of kind of rightward triangulation is wrong in its own right, but it also doesn't work. It really doesn't work, and you can see the evidence of that, I think, clearly in the by-elections. And so I think Sinn Féin have a choice to make. We hope they make the right choice, we really do. Obviously, in the sense that they make the wrong choice, it clears the field a little bit on the left. It can make it easier for us in a short-term electoral sense. But we think there's an historic opportunity here, which is to clear out Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and to have a left-wing government. If that's going to happen in terms of the numbers, it's hard to find the numbers for that without Sinn Féin, and therefore we hope that Sinn Féin makes the right choice, which I think many of their activists on the ground are uncomfortable with some of what they've been doing recently and would like to see a change of direction.
Can I just say, because Solidarity certainly has never, given Sinn Féin a free pass at all. And when you attack and backtrack on women's rights, like they did, a week or so ago in the Dáil, when you lean into some of the talking points of the far right and racists by, for example, cutting Ukrainian supports, refusing to comment on other people's comments, which I spoke about in the Plinth here last week, you pay a price for that. You alienate the vast majority of people who are looking for an anti-racist, progressive left alternative, and I think that they pay the price in Dublin Central for that.
And I just ask you, if they make what you described as the wrong choice, Mark Lowen was included in a kind of formal vote left transfer pact in Galway West. If they keep going down this direction, would you be advocating against Sinn Féin being included in such a pact in a future general election?
Well, I think one problem in this election is that there weren't pacts. There was the perception of pacts, and it was progress that people all said vote left, transfer left. But that was kind of left for the voters to decide who was that and who was not that. And that's why from the start we have always said we want a pact based on clear principles. And those principles would be a commitment to building social and affordable housing on massive scale through a state construction company, a commitment to serious action to tackle the cost of living crisis, but also a commitment not to engage in scapegoating of asylum seekers, not to backtrack on women's rights and so on. So as well as no coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. So that's what we would like to see, and then we'd like to have negotiation around what are those principles. And of course there needs to be give and take in terms of what those principles are, but there are kind of bottom line points for us. But that I think the effect of that, obviously you can hold people then to certain positions, people know what they're voting for, but also I think you get the benefit of a common projection, which I think there was a relatively high transfer rate between what people would generally see as the parties, the parties who were saying vote left, transfer left. But I think that can go even higher if you have a common pact, a common projection, and you polarise the election. It's a choice, Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, or the chance to get rid of them and have a left government.
When is the Israel protest?
There's protests today at 12:30 till 2 o'clock, organised by the Irish Palestine Solidarity campaign. But it's important to emphasise that the majority of people in Irish football have expressed their opposition to this game going ahead and believe that Israel should not be part of international competition. So the FAI and the Irish government are not representing the sentiments of Irish football or the sentiments of the majority of people in this country who think it's outrageous that we would entertain the football team of a state that is committing genocide, is guilty of apartheid, and kidnapped and tortured Irish people along with others on the high seas in just the last week or two. It's beggars belief that the Irish